Right to be Read podcast, episode number 72. Interview with Mark Schaefer. Are you struggling trying to figure out how to sell copies of your book, especially the first 100 copies? The Author Marketing Institute is offering access to their latest free video course called Selling the First 100 Copies of Your Book. This is the course everyone should have when they started publishing. It goes through all the basics from starting a mailing list to experimenting with different prices. If you follow the instructions in this course, you should be primed and ready to sell your first 100 copies, if not many more. Sign up for free at www.authormarketinginstitute.com.
You are listening to the Right to be Read podcast, and this is your host, Ani Alexander.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Right to be Read podcast. I'm your host, Ani Alexander, and with each episode, I'm trying to inspire and encourage you. Before we start, I would like to thank everyone who wrote me this week with feedback and suggestions. I promise that I will make sure that you get reply from me, and I'll make sure that all the topics that you suggest me to cover, I will make it happen for you. And before we start, I would like to remind you once again that with Meron Barakat from Podcast Incubator, we are making a webinar, a free webinar especially created for you on the 18th of February, where we will show you how to gain an audience, get in front of avid readers, and sell more books. To check the details and to register, please go to www.anialexander.com/webinar. www.anialexander.com/webinar. And now let me get to my guest. Today I have a very special guest for you, and we will be covering a very interesting topic. So today I will be talking to Mark Schaefer. Mark Schaefer is a college educator, marketing consultant, and author of 4 social media marketing books, including Social Media Explained. So let's get to the interview now. Hello, Mark. I'm really happy to have you over, and welcome to the Right to be Read podcast.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, yeah, I'm delighted too. So I really would like to start from the very beginning, because I know that you have an interesting story, your life story of becoming a writer yourself and ending up doing what you're doing right now.
Well, I always loved writing. Even when I was just a young boy, I always loved writing stories, and eventually became a journalism major when I went to college. But only worked in writing for a short time. And I went into business and spent most of my career in sales and marketing, and really didn't get back into writing until I started my own company around 2008. And that's also when I started to blog. And I fell in love with blogging and rediscovered my love of writing, really. And wrote my first book, The Tao of Twitter. It's TAO, Tao, some people call it, or Tao. And I decided to self-publish it because it was a small book. I just wanted to write a small, helpful book about Twitter. And all the publishers said, well, we want a large book so we can get more money for it. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that just doesn't make sense. I'm not going to write a big book about Twitter. So I decided to self-publish, and the book became the best-selling book on Twitter as a self-published book. And then I got a book contract, and I wrote 3 other books for a publisher. And then the publisher also picked up the Twitter book and relaunched that, because they discovered that I was right, that it was best to be a small book. And now I'm going back to self-publishing. My last book is called Social Media Explained. I wrote that last year, came out in March of 2014. And that did very, very well. It was the best-selling social media book on Amazon in 2014 here in America. And I think there's just a lot of problems with the publishing industry right now. And I see a lot of advantages in self-publishing. And so, I'm thinking that's the way I'm going to be heading from here on out. I just completed a new book. It's at an editor right now, and that'll be coming out probably in March of 2015. It's called The Content Code, and that's going to be self-published as well.
Oh, great. Well, actually, I'm not surprised because I meet many authors who kind of, after trying both routes, end up preferring the self-publishing. And there are various reasons for that. Which are the reasons for you?
Well, if you look at, I had this unusual experience where I wrote this book and I self-published it, and I saw the sales of the book as it was self-published, and then it was picked up by a publisher, and the sales were basically the same, except they were keeping all the money.
Uh-huh.
And I think the two, there are three big advantages to going through a publisher. Number one is distribution. So potentially you could get your book into different types of bookstores and other sales channels that it's more difficult to get into if you've self-published. Another advantage is, of course, you get an advance. Mm-hmm. And that's very helpful because it helps pay for your time to write the book. I mean, I had to take months off of work to write this book. And had to turn down different business opportunities because I had to concentrate on the book. So the editing and the advance, the distribution are all advantages. And then I think there's also something about esteem. There's something that drives your ego to say, well, I've got a book contract with a publisher, but once you put that aside, once you put the ego aside, what I'm finding is that there's a lot more advantages to self-publishing. And of course, you don't have those distribution channels, but those distribution channels aren't as important as they used to be because most people are buying online anyway. Mm-hmm. So there's not that much of an impact on the distribution. There are lots of options out there to help you edit the book, to have a nice design for the book. You don't necessarily need a publisher for that. And in my latest book, I have corporate sponsors for the book. So they're giving me money and that takes the place of the advance. Mm-hmm. But it's a better advantage because I don't have to pay it back.
Exactly.
So they're basically paying they're more or less patrons of the book. I think it's an interesting new model. It's like the artists have always really had to survive when you have to find someone to sponsor you, and I think that's the world we're living in today. There's the publishing industry is very sick. It's very confused. In some cases, it's desperate. And for this latest book, I never even took it to a publisher. I'm saying, I'm going self-publishing all the way on this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. Well, actually, I also think that one important part of the whole thing is also having the total control over your book when you're self-publishing it.
That's huge. That's huge. Yes, I totally agree. And, you write it the way you want to write it. You can distribute it and sell it the way you want to sell it. My published books, my own books that go through a publisher, the best way for me to acquire those books on my own is to buy them from Amazon. I'm the author of the book. I don't get any better deal than anybody else. Mm-hmm. Self-published book, I can buy them very inexpensively and hand them out at speeches if I want to hand them out. So, and it can be a very effective marketing tool. I know we're going to talk about personal branding and an author.
Yeah.
And I think for beginning authors, it's absolutely critical to build a personal brand. And one way to do that is, at least for your first writing efforts, is you've got to really give books away. You've got to get the content to spread. You can't really think about making money at first because you've got to build your audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, I just recalled when we were comparing the self-publishing to the traditional publishing, I just recalled that we covered this also with Joanna Penn when I was interviewing her. And we had this analogy of self-publishing being the entrepreneurship and traditional publishing being the corporate world. Somehow it feels like that.
I think that's true. I mean, right now, I'm considering, I have this new book coming out. I'm very excited about it. I think it's my best book. And so I need to be thinking about, how do I market this thing? How do I create interest in this book? And you might think, well, Mark, if you had a publisher, the publisher would take care of that. But the irony is they don't anymore. They really, at least most publishers, unless you're a celebrity superstar, they really don't put marketing dollars behind your books. You're left to market your books anyway, and you make less money. So I'm taking some of my corporate sponsorship money, and I'm going to be putting that into marketing, and I have to think through, how do I market this thing? And so I agree, there is definitely an entrepreneurial aspect to it.
Mm-hmm. And since, I don't know, I mean, whether writers want to accept it or not, but self-published authors are business people, because it's, the book is their product, and they are dealing with all the aspects of the business, starting from the publishing it until the marketing it and selling it. So if we look at from that angle, we also can say that the author himself is a personal brand, which he is creating and he's establishing in the market, and his name is actually the brand name he is supposed to keep. So what do you think about that, and how important that brand name is, do you think?
I saw a quote. I'll try to get this right. It was from the American pop singer Taylor Swift, who's a very, very popular star, and she said, in the past, you would get a record contract and grow an audience. In the future, you'll have to have an audience before you get a contract. And I think that's the same way it's going to be for any artist or any author, is that today we have to be responsible for building our audience. And that's really where the value is going to come. That's where the power is going to come. And that's where the money is going to come. We can't depend on publishers to do that anymore. And the great news is, with tools like social media, we have the opportunity to do that. We have the opportunity to connect with people from all over the world, become friends with them, learn from them. Look how you and I got connected. I'm in America. You're in Armenia. We're becoming friends. We're collaborating together today on something. I'm helping you. You're helping me. Who knows where that will lead in the future? And every author has that opportunity to make those connections, to build relationships with people who will have a genuine interest in you as a person, and enough of an interest that they'll want to buy your book eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know why some people kind of, take it negatively a bit, because when we're talking about personal brand, I had recently on Facebook a comment about this topic saying, why are people trying to come up with, names and with tags and trying to sell everything, etc. So they were kind of looking at personal branding, like kind of, just branding yourself so you can sell yourself better. And I think there is much more to that, and it's not really only about that. So what do you think the personal brand itself consists of? What does it represent?
Well, I think you're asking a very, very good question. And I think I love the question because you're making a distinction between selling and creating an image or a brand. And a brand, whether it's for a company or a person, is the image that people have about you in their brain. And so do people think that you're creative, provocative, interesting? Do they think you're reliable? Do they think your writing is exciting or scary or romantic? So that all goes into your image. And I've been writing so long now that people, they read my blog, and even though I've never met them, I probably never talked to them on the phone, they still feel like they know me. And through my writing on my blog and through social media, which I think is the best way to build a brand for an author today by far, through these little provocations, these little messages that I send, whether it's on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or on my blog, people come to know me and they like me and they trust me and they begin to align themselves with what I stand for. So now the book that I'm coming out with, this is my 5th book. And I know that people will buy this book just because they know me and they like me and they trust me. They don't have to wait for the reviews. Mm-hmm. They know that they trust my writing. They trust my voice of authority, really. And they know Mark writes a book, it's going to be a book that I like. And it doesn't happen overnight. I've been working on this for years. It's very, very difficult to sell books. But here's the one thing I guarantee: you can't sell books without an audience. And I think that's what a lot of authors overlook. They think, well, as long as I have great content, as long as I've written a great book, it's just going to sell itself. No. And that's not true. That's simply not going to happen, because people are so busy today. There are so many distractions on their time that you really have to earn a place in their life. You have to earn the trust, so they know, if I spend my money on this book and I devote my time on this book, it's going to be something that's worth it. It's almost like developing friendship. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is, once you start building these relationships and people love the book, then they start spreading that news to other people. And that's what happened with my Twitter book. As I self-published it, people bought it because they believed in me, they believed in my writing, and then they found that they loved the book, and then they started talking about it, and they started buying copies to give to their friends and give to their family members, and that's how it kind of took off. But you've got to have that initial audience to really ignite it.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And I think that the brand consists of different components. So it's not only your writing, it's also your personality, mm-hmm. It's also you as a speaker, and it's also everything you share through social media and your views and your thoughts and everything connected all together. So that leads me to the following question: what do you think is better, or is there any kind of a compromise option in between those two, whether one should brand his writing or he should brand his person or personality?
That's an interesting question. I've never really quite thought about it that way. I can only speak for myself, I guess. and what's worked for me. But I mean, I write nonfiction business books, so very much the books, they are me. They're my voice. They're my ideas. They're my philosophies. Now that might be different if I was writing science fiction or romance novels or something like that, where the writing might be much different than the brand of the person. But that still doesn't mean you don't need to create relationships, to go out and meet your fans, meet your readers, have book signings, shake hands and build those relationships so they feel like they have this emotional connection with you. But that's a really good question. I think it might be different in whether you're a fiction or nonfiction writer. But, speaking for myself, I mean, the writing is me. It's very much a part of my personality. I mean, in my books, jokes, I have funny parts. There's certain ways. I mean, many people say when they read my books, they feel like I'm sitting across the table, having a cup of coffee and just talking to them. I have a very conversational tone. So I think my personality does come through in my books. And I think that's one of the selling points.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I was just wondering because I couldn't come up with my own answer to that. That's why I asked to you. Okay, so what about the beliefs and the values the brand has usually? How do you communicate that? Is it through the writings or through your blog and social media? Or, I mean, how important is to make people know about those as part of your brand?
I think it's very important. In some ways, I think it's the most important thing. And one of the things, actually, the topic of my new book, it's called The Content Code. It's all about how do you stand out in a noisy world. And really, the conclusion of the book is the people that are going to be that have the courage to show themselves and to be human and not be a fakey person, but be someone who is honest and true and sincere and authentic. Those are the people that fans are going to connect with because they know that they can believe with them. I interviewed a famous author one time when I was doing research for a book, and he's a very well-known author. His name's Dr. Robert Cialdini, and he speaks all over the world. And at the end of the interview, I asked him, I said, Dr. Cialdini, in this very, very busy, noisy world, how do you stand out? How does a person stand out? And he said, be more human. He said, bring that personal story, bring that humanity into everything that you do. And, that was something, it was probably like 2011 that he said that to me. And the longer I've been in this business and the more I've been immersed in this business, the more I think he's absolutely right.
Well, and yeah, exactly. The sad truth is that these days being human is quite a unique feature, unfortunately. So it's a way to stand out, apparently.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think. Go ahead.
No, come on.
Well, I mean, because you the other part of your question, you were asking about, how does that come out in our communications and messages? And I think we have to think that through, that everything we say and everything we don't say on the social web accumulates with people and becomes part of that brand. And so we have to remember that no matter how casual the conversation might be, it's still whatever we do and whatever we say becomes part of the brand. So we need to think about that.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And I was just wondering that opening up is kind of, very important component of showing your brand and being yourself and being human. But also there are some people who are introverts. There are some people who, for let's say me, for different cultural reasons, are not really used to opening up too much and showing too much of their personal life or different details, etc. So how do you think one should find this balance between opening up completely and showing the personality he or she has, and also feeling quite comfortable with that because, not everything you really want to share, actually?
Yeah, that's a very a great question. And I had, when I was starting out, I had this theory that the most extroverted people, the people that were the loudest and communicated the most, might have an advantage in developing a personal brand. And every time I mentioned that, introverted people would say, "No, that's not true at all," because when I'm in, and by the way, I consider myself an introverted person. I mean, I'm not, I'm a nice person. I'm a friendly person, but I'm not the life of the party. I like quieter things. But an introverted person said, when I'm in a big room of people, I might be uncomfortable and shy. But on the internet, I can communicate the way I want to communicate. And I feel like I kind of have an equal setting with everybody because it's not a big crowded room. It's me and one other person or a couple other people. I said, I thought that is a very good point. And I hear this over and over again. And I really believe it's true. And upon reflection, I think it's true for me. I mean, I hate being in big crowds of people. I don't really like being at loud parties. I'd rather have a nice quiet dinner with one person or two people. That's where I'm most. And you think, well, gosh, Mark, how do you survive in this social media world where there are thousands and thousands of people? But it's not thousands and thousands of people. It's communicating with one person at a time, kind of on your terms. And so I am comfortable in that world.
Yeah, interesting that, I never thought about that distinguishment of, between the virtual and the real life. But now when I'm looking at it, yeah, exactly. You kind of, it's you feel protected somehow when you are behind the screen, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. And you don't have to be witty in the moment. You don't have to be entertaining. You don't have to be funny. When you're behind the screen, you can think about it for a few minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a safety margin in there.
Yeah, you have a safety margin.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking that, let's say we spoke about brand being the image and the way people perceive you. And usually the corporate brands kind of create that branding and the image from scratch or from the very beginning. So they don't really have this core DNA in place from the very start. And here we have our personality and we have what we are already in place. So how do you think, how much should one differentiate? I mean, should one strategically come up with an image or a brand which not necessarily is completely 100% genuine to the personality, but will work for strategic reasons? Or you think that at some point anyway the personality will show off and it won't work on long term?
Well, I think you're right. I think that's the case. In fact, I've actually seen that happen where people create an image, they create a persona that's not really them. And what happens is that over time, it just becomes exhausting. They become exhausted trying to keep up this image of somebody that they're not. And I think, I think if you're a kind person, if you care about people, if you take an interest in people and you listen, I think you're going to be fine, whether you're an introvert or you're an extrovert. I think if you're an unkind person, I think if you're, mean and abrasive, that's going to come out eventually anyway. It really is. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'm learning is, we have this new generation coming up of, the millennials, and this is the generation. They manage their relationships on tweets and Instagram messages and text messages. Mm-hmm. And they can spot a fake in 140 characters. They're highly, highly skilled at determining truth and determining what's real with very limited information. So I think if you try to fake it, I don't think that's a sustainable strategy. I think you just need to kind of relax, have fun, be yourself, and really, it's the only choice you have. To stand out, you have to be original, and to be original, you have to have the courage to show yourself, to be yourself, because there's only one you. Mm-hmm. You have no competition. There's only one you. It's the only option you have to be original. So don't worry about it. Just have, and it is difficult sometimes. It's difficult for me because I'm a pretty private person. I don't share a lot about my family. I try to show little glimpses of my life so people can see kind of, my values and how I live. But I will say that every time I push myself and expose something about myself, I get rewarded for it. Mm-hmm. People say, "Oh boy, that makes me feel closer to you. That makes me feel like maybe you can understand me because we have a similar history or similar bond, or we've been through similar problems." So when you do take that risk and you do share your personality even a little bit, it's usually rewarded.
Yeah, and I think that although it's, we see risk in that, and of course, not everyone will like, what you've said or done because, people are different. But I think that that's the good strategy in a sense that you will end up with the people who are like-minded and who like you. So at the end, maybe the audience will be smaller than you would like to, but it will be a higher quality audience, let's say.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And you just reminded me of I went through exactly that same thing when I started out as a blogger and a writer. In my mind, I had this traditional marketing framework that I was going to be this persona, and I was going to deliver this message to my target audience. And when I started doing that, two things happened. First of all, nothing happened. And second of all, I became bored. I was trying to, sustain something that it wasn't really me. And then when I kind of relaxed and said, "Oh, heck with it. I'm just going to write, forget about this target message. I'm just going to write what I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. And if I see something funny, I'm going to write about something funny." And that changed everything. Mm-hmm. Because instead of finding my target audience, it's, as you say, my audience found me. The right people found me. Mm-hmm. The people who trusted me and liked me and wanted to buy my books found me, and that made all the difference.
Okay, well, so much about the, finding the niche and sticking to the niche target market, which usually most of the marketers, advise as an effective strategy. Yeah, well, if we would like to wrap up, and for someone who's just starting out, who is writing his very first book, let's say, and who doesn't have a presence and audience in place yet, so it's just the very first steps, what do you think, where he should start creating and establishing his brand? What should be the very first steps and things he should do?
Well, I think the wonderful opportunity we all have today is to establish a connection and an audience through social media. It's just an amazing opportunity. It's a historically important opportunity to connect with people that we should all take advantage of. And I think, where do you go? It probably would be different country by country, region by region. But I found Twitter to be a very good place to start because you can it's easy to find people who might be interested in you. Mm-hmm. You're a lot more limited on a place like Facebook or Twitter. There are different tools out there. In fact, on my book, the Tao of Twitter, TAO, Tao of Twitter, chapter 5 has, I think, 25 different ideas on how to find people who would be interested in you. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, very important chapter, maybe the most important chapter of the book. So that's the first thing I would do is, number one, establish a presence and find those people. You can't wait for people to come to you. You have to go and find those people. Connect with those people. Create value. Give away little snippets of your writing. If you're a brand new writer with your very first book, think about giving away your books. Mm-hmm. Every opportunity, because you want the books to spread. It takes time. It takes patience. Unless you're already a celebrity, unless you're a television star or a movie star, and everybody loves you, so they're going to buy your book. Most people aren't like that. So you have to take the time. There's no shortcut. You have to do the work to build your audience, build that trust, give things away so they know about you and they know about your writing, and be patient on building your brand.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And be consistent, most probably, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you have to engage consistently.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we kind of covered the basics and, we helped people for their starting stage. So they know where to start, how to start. They now know how important the personal brand is, and especially for authors. So I guess we covered quite a lot. Anything else you would like to add? Where people could find you and your books maybe, or something else?
Well, first, I'd like to thank you very much for having me on your podcast. And obviously, you did your homework and asked really great questions that I've never heard before. So that's great. It was very interesting for me. And for anyone listening to your podcast, I'd love to be connected with them. You can find me, everything about me, on my website. It's businessesgrow.com. And on Businesses Grow, you can find my blog, my podcast, the books that I've written, and lots of other materials to help you with your marketing and your personal brand.
Oh, thank you very much. And just as we mentioned about the target market and the niche and doing things differently, that sometimes it works much better. I usually never prepare my questions in advance. So I just go with the flow. And I think that the fact that, we came up with different questions from those who you are usually getting is just because we spent the time just talking to each other, like, as you said, like human beings.
Yeah, that's great. Good job, and thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, and have a nice day. Well, it seems like that was it for today. I really hope that you enjoyed the interview as much as I did, because I truly loved talking to Mark. And as a final reminder, the webinar, which will be held on February 18th, created especially for you by Meran Bereket from the Podcast Incubator. You can check out all the details and register at www.anialexander.com/webinar. As always, I'm looking for your emails. Please shoot me one at annie@anialexander.com. And if you have a minute and would like to help the podcast grow, please leave a review on Stitcher or iTunes for the podcast. Thank you very much. Keep writing. Stay as creative as you are. And try to be organized so that creativity also turns into productivity. Take care and see you next time. Are you struggling trying to figure out how to sell copies of your book, especially the first 100 copies? The Author Marketing Institute is offering access to their latest free video course called Selling the First 100 Copies of Your Book. This is the course everyone should have when they started publishing. It goes through all the basics from starting a mailing list to experimenting with different prices. If you follow the instructions in this course, you should be primed and ready to sell your first 100 copies, if not many more. Sign up for free at www.authormarketinginstitute.com.